Hello, my name is Benjamin, Ben for short, from Flex, a company that most of you probably never have heard of before. But I promise you, now I can hear myself. I promise you that in all likelihood you own something or you use something that we have built for one of our customers. If you own a car, if you have a coffee machine, we probably were involved somehow. So Flex is one of those companies that is everywhere, does a lot of different things. Nobody knows we exist. And the first thing I wanted to mention, which was already brought up, so I chose a really complicated sounding title, facilitating a continuous improvement culture using data-driven techniques. And I want to take you on a little bit of a roller coaster ride. We're not actually going to talk that much about data. I should have shortened the title maybe to data, people, and change, which is more descriptive to what we're actually doing today. And I want to guide you through what we did, a practical example, give you a couple of lessons learned from me personally, and maybe you find some parallels in your own organization, in your own projects. So, and with this, let me guide you through one of the projects that I was involved in, that we really learned a lot about data, how to utilize data, what to be mindful of. And our project was basically our recruitment process. The recruitment process was implemented in its current form roughly 10 years ago, and over time there were lots of changes, lots of attempts at changes. Some of them worked, many of them didn't properly work. And a little while ago, a new CEO came, new leadership came, new strategy, new KPIs, new metrics, and we tried to adjust. We already knew we had some problems in our existing process, but now it felt like the time now that we can really try to get some change done. So once again, we went into the change, the improvement mode, we came up with improvements, we did some internal developments, surveys, analysis, and then we went to our stakeholders and we said, hey guys, there's the problem, let's fix it. And sort of, we should have expected that. The response from the stakeholders was, no, it's not our problem. It's not a me problem, it's a you problem. You need to do better. So raise your hand if that sounds sort of familiar to your project. You're really trying to do something. And the people you're trying to drop the improvement on say, nah, that's not for me. You have to do something else. If that seems familiar, this may be relevant to you. So with this, a little bit of a background on Flex, because that is relevant to why I'm talking about data in the first place. So what is Flex? Flex is a very diverse company. Flex does a lot of different things. Flex is primarily a contract manufacturer. Flex is in EMS, so we build electronics products. But Flex also does design engineering work. Flex does logistics and supply chain solutions. So we do, or we can provide everything through the entire product lifecycle. And Flex does lifestyle products. Flex does automotive technologies. Flex does medical technologies. So from a product perspective, from an industry perspective, it's a very diverse company. And then we are culturally diverse. We're all across the planet. We operate in 30 different countries. At 100 different sites, we have 150,000 plus people working for us. Lots of different cultures, lots of different ways of working, coming together under a single roof. And then we're also very diverse just from the way the company came to be where we are today, because we often grew through mergers and acquisitions. And there are cultural artifacts from companies coming together under a single roof. So there's different approaches, different cultural backgrounds, different social norms coming together under the company. And then there are some brands even. Typically when Flex builds something, it's for a customer. We don't build Flex products with a couple of exceptions. And those exceptions, they really have brand identities. They may not be customer or consumer products, but they're still proud of what they do. They are building their own product. And that's, again, a different culture to the rest of the company where we build for the customer under the customer's brand. And then we have different functions. We have operations or the manufacturing part, which is a different culture to corporate, where I am from. And then we have the engineers, which is, again, the design engineers, for instance. That's a different culture to the manufacturing engineers. So there's all of this diversity in the company, but there's one thing that ties it all together, which is our culture. And this gives us a shared identity, an umbrella under which we operate, even though there is individual identities below it. There's still MCI in the Netherlands. That's MCI, but they are under Flex culture. There is India, which is still under Flex culture. There's Mexico, which is still under Flex culture. It ties us all together. And one specific element that really ties us all together is the idea of continuous improvement that comes from manufacturing. Ingo mentioned in the beginning, he lives Kaizen, he lives lean, that's what he said. And that's true for Flex as well, because if you're in manufacturing, if you're in engineering, lean and Six Sigma, this is something that you breathe, that is something that you live every day. This is natural, that is normal to you, you understand it. And this is why we chose to go this route this time for our improvement project. Because one of the ideas why we chose this route was, if we apply what we already have in terms of culture, if we apply what we already have in terms of knowledge, then we are also speaking the language that our leaders are speaking. Because most of our business leaders are engineers. Not all of them, but most of them. So there's this engineering culture at the company. And we want to tie into this, we want to leverage this as a positive. And another thing that is also useful here, engineering, manufacturing, change is a constant. Change happens all the time. Many companies say that. In manufacturing, this is actually planned into the product lifecycle. You calculate a project expecting the beginning phase is not going to go well, or at least it's not going to be optimized yet. And then it improves over time, and that's when you make money. That is normal in manufacturing. So when we say change is constant, we live it, we mean it. And I can tell you from 5 years of experience, it happens even in corporate. There's change all the time. It doesn't always work for different reasons, but it happens all the time. So with this, our challenge, we had to find out, so going back to the recruitment process from the beginning, we had to find out what's really wrong. We had to find out how to fix it. And we had to find out how to fix it sustainably. Because we had tried many, many different fixes, small fixes, and we have tried big fixes, and we have tried SOPs, and we have tried SLAs. And some of it worked, much of it didn't work. Some of it worked for a short time, but didn't stick around. So we really had to find out what was going wrong. We had to point our finger at it, and then we had to implement it with our stakeholders sustainably. So, some of the past mistakes. We jumped at obvious symptoms, and we tried to fix the symptoms. This isn't going well, so we're fixing this. But we didn't fix the actual cause causing the symptom. It's a very classic mistake to make. We didn't involve the people actually using the process. In my opinion, probably one of the biggest mistakes that we did. So we come up with these new processes, those new systems, drop it on people's heads, forget to ask the people who actually have to use it, and then wonder why it didn't actually work. And another real big issue is process and systems creep in general. Trying to fix the symptom, we apply a new process. Trying to fix this, another new process. And suddenly people who were used to doing 5 things have to do 15 different things to achieve the same or maybe even a worse result than before. And then systems creep, you can also call it shiny new toy syndrome. So there's the new solution X. Let's buy solution X to fix our problem. And then there's the new solution Y. Let's buy that to fix that problem. And sometimes we do forget to use what we already have to its full potential. It's not always a problem, but it is certainly also a problem that we have to be mindful of. And then, maybe the biggest problem that we had in the past was actually rolling out the changes with some of our stakeholders. So we were really not doing a good job at working with our stakeholders and our customers. internal customers, when rolling out those changes. We had a problem to convince them why it was necessary to do this. Why can't we just stick with what we are already doing? Why do we have to change this process? Why do we have to tell people, my expectation of you is to do this in 24 hours? Because on average it works anyway. We were not good at convincing people, and people had reasons for resisting change. We heard before that people don't actually resist change, they resist loss of something. It can be political power, it can be safety, it can be... Sometimes it is regulatory hurdles. I'm working a lot with automotive and then medical, and it's true, there's statutory requirements, there's regulatory requirements. Change is hard, but that doesn't mean, or that shouldn't mean that change cannot happen at all. And this is where we have to do a better job to convince people. It may be difficult, it may be hard, but there's a positive reason why we want to do this. So the results, as already mentioned, is changes and improvements either didn't work at all, or they didn't stick, or they didn't get off the ground properly. And maybe I should have added, they didn't stick, they weren't anchored. And we didn't follow up, and we didn't follow through with the change, and then it went either somewhere or it went back to how it used to be. So, transition. If there's going to be change, if there's going to be real change, it will have to work its way up from the bottom, from the people themselves. That's how change happens. Howard Zinn, really interesting American intellectual, academic. Actually, he has done so many different things. Really interesting person. I like this quote very much because I think it is absolutely true to creating sustainable change. So, in our case, not so new approach was to utilize what we already had, which is a really strong Lean and Six Sigma culture to our advantage, to speak the language of our business leaders, of our GMs, of our segment leads, and to apply it both top-down and bottom-up. Top-down is something that I'm going to speak about more, which we've also heard today already, is sponsor, which is essential to applying this type of approach. If the sponsor isn't on board, this isn't going to work. And bottom-up is about empowering the people actually using the process you're trying to improve. Leveraging data. This is a data-driven approach. Kaizens, especially Six Sigma, you need a lot of data. But the expectation here wasn't to make everybody have to work with data. It's about empowering them with data to come up with solutions. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this on a future slide. It's focused on the customer. Now you have to define who the customer is. In manufacturing, the customer is basically who pays. In a transactional process like this is an HR process, it may be a little bit more fuzzy to define who the customer is, but you still need to define a customer because you're going to try to optimize the process for that customer. So if I define my customer as the candidate, that's going to be different than my customer being the hiring manager. You have to think about that. And there's not a right or wrong customer. It's about you defining who the customer is. And then empowering the users, I already meant, the people working with the process. I want them to do the work. I want them to improve their process. But I need to give them the support so they can do that. And then it's really important to fix the root causes, not just the symptoms, not just the issues that are visible. And this is what Kaizen is really, really good at, if you do it right. And the big challenge was the application to a transactional process, because we do this in manufacturing all the time. Like, I'm not even joking, all the time. Doing this for a transactional process is something that is done much more infrequently, and it's something where we had, and still have, to be honest, to build up more knowledge. So, Kaizen. What is it? If you have never heard of Kaizen or never done a Kaizen or seen a Kaizen, it's one method for continuous improvement. It's a cyclical method. That's why it's called continuous improvement. It's not a one-off that you do once and then you never do it again. You do it again and again. You do one Kaizen, maybe once a quarter, once a year, and then you start to basically prepare for the next one. Because the assumption is there's no perfect process. There's always something that you can improve. And then what does it need? Kaizen needs a sponsor. And this may be, all of the elements are important, but if the sponsor isn't on board, as we heard before, if the sponsor asks, why is this even important to me? You have already lost. The sponsor is the person with the power to make things happen, the power of organizing resources if you need them for the project. The person to say, we do this, and then no matter if somebody says, I don't want to, it's gonna get done. This usually has to be somebody high enough up in the hierarchy of the organization to make those kinds of decisions. If that person isn't on board with this improvement project, it's not going to go out, or the likelihood that it's going to fail is very, very high. Then you need a facilitator, or facilitators, multiple. That's the Kaizen lead for sure. The Kaizen lead is the person who organizes the project, who organizes the data, does a lot of the pre-analysis of the project, and then supplies the participants with that data, with the tools, with the value stream map, the current state, all of the materials that they need to then work on the project. Because the team, the participants, are the ones to do the job. It's their process. They're going to improve it. The facilitator gives them the resources so they can do it. Then a team of participants, but it's not just a random team of participants, it's the process owners, the process users, and they are prepared. They have to do some training, usually a couple of weeks of training's worth before they can end. So they know what to do, they know the tools they're about to apply. They don't have to have previous Kaizen experience, but they have to have received preparation. Otherwise, they can't effectively do the improvement project. And then, especially the first time you do it, telling from experience, you do have to have a robust change management process in place. You do need to have somebody who has experience in change management in order to not just do the project, implement the change, you have to follow through, you have to anchor it, otherwise the change goes nowhere. And again, preparation and training for everybody involved, at least the first time. So, Kaizen roles, I already mentioned the sponsor, that's the person backing the project, that's the person with the power to say, we do this. And again, needs to be high up enough to overrule resistance in the area the project may be. The facilitators, important, the Kaizen lead. That person is going to organize everything. It's typically a Six Sigma green belt, but doesn't have to be. You can do this role without a black belt or green belt certification, whatnot. You do need preparation, you do need some statistical training, but you don't have to have a fancy certification for it. Other facilitators can be the GMs, can be office managers, line managers, anybody who indirectly supports, provides resources to the project team, that's a facilitator. And then the participants are the people working with the process to be improved. They need to have the basic training in Lean and Kaizen, and they're guided by the facilitator, specifically the Kaizen project lead. And then we go into the project. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but the starting point is really you have to define your process, you have to define your problem, you have to define your goals. Otherwise, you're going to do something, but you're not going to achieve what you want to achieve. So really, it's about understanding the current situation. You typically do this by creating a value stream map, defining who the customer is, etc., etc. And in Kaizen and Lean terms, you typically identify waste. That's basically this. Not going to go too deep into this, with one exception that I really want to call out, 3G, Gemba, Genjutsu, Genjitsu. You don't need to really know what that means, it's just you want to analyze the real thing. You don't want to do a high-level process analysis and you say, I think this works this way and this way. You have to go deep. You have to ask the people working with your process, what do you actually do when you press this button? Do you even press this button? It says in the process you press this button. Do you actually do it? Turns out that's not always the case. People have creative ways to getting around things. Sometimes entire process steps will get skipped in practice because it serves no benefit in real life. And people find ways to get around it. You have to ask what is the real process, not what we have on paper created 10 years ago. Getting your data. I said we're not going to talk a lot about data, that's still true. Just 1 or 2 slides about data. Typically, you have data everywhere these days. you have an ERP system, you have a CRM system, whatever else you use, you probably have some data. And you probably have some IT person or an IT team or a vendor that can get you access to that data. Especially transactional systems like SAP or Workday, everything gets logged. Every single button press gets logged. You can get access to that data for your process analysis. And again, I mentioned before, you need to understand the real process because those things, they sometimes log button presses, but that doesn't mean the process happens as you think it does. And you have to understand the format that data gets logged in, because if you want, and that's measurement systems analysis problem, if you want to measure a process step that takes minutes, but your EP shows you days, it's not super helpful. You want to understand how many minutes something takes, but the system tells you it takes 0 days because it rounds it down, not going to work properly. So you want to have some understanding of the data that you're working with. And if you actually have no data, which is very unlikely, you can always do an experiment. You can do a time and motion study to get some data. But these days, most of the time, you already have some data. And really, the last slide on data itself. So the good news, you or the Kaizen facilitator don't need to have an advanced degree in statistics, but you do need to have some basic statistics knowledge, at least really foundational knowledge. And then you should understand the data that you're looking at. I mentioned before, is my measurement system good enough? Do I have continuous or discrete data? Is it rounded? Is it in a format that I can use? And don't make and that's the biggest one, not just for this, but in general. Averages, medians are your enemy in most cases. By definition, they don't tell you the whole story of your data. An average may look perfectly fine, but if you then take a look at a variability chart, like the one on figure 3, the average is super nice, but there is so many outliers and extreme outliers in that data. This isn't a good process. This is not a stable process. There's a problem here. There's people being upset because things take this long. And again, if you just look at an average, hey, everything is fine. Don't do that. If you take anything away from today, it's that. Don't just take averages and medians. Then, this is based on an example from us, basically, tale of 2 companies. One candidate, Mary Median, just to illustrate the averages problem, she gets an offer just a couple of days after her interview. She's super happy. She recommends the company to everybody. That's when you look at medians and averages. Everything is fine. And then Oscar Outlier is one of those many cases that didn't go fine, had to wait forever, almost a month for his offer. The recruitment process took almost 2 months. And before they even joined the company, they are already unhappy, and they're going to tell their people to stay away because this was just such an ordeal. This is basically the situation that we had before we did this project, before we really took a look at the root causes of our situation. So, Simon Sinek quote, because I thought it was fitting, working hard for something we don't care about is called stress, and working hard for something we love is called passion. And the Kaizen approach is about making people love what they work for and work with because they're the one to improve it. This is what this is about today. So this is about empowering our people. Me, as the facilitator, for instance, I prepare everything, I guide the participants through the Kaizen week. And the Kaizen, so I provide all of the support. When somebody needs something, and if it's just a glass of water, I'm going to organize that for them. If a resource is needed, and I can't get it for them immediately, I go to my sponsor, who I made sure before is already on board, to make sure they can get it. And the participants are the ones to work out the real issues, to work out the root causes using typical Kaizen tools. We heard before Kaizen is a toolbox. It is sort of true. There's lots of different tools you can use. And they apply them to find out what is the real issue. They come up with solutions, what we could do. And they prioritize those solutions according to whatever methodology that you choose. And I'm going to go a little bit quicker. Word of caution, if it's the first time you do this kind of process, you may find a lot of issues, and you may find a lot of issues that you didn't expect that you have. So this is a practical example from our case. And here, it's again important that you need to have the sponsorship support, because, I'm jumping ahead because we're really, really late already, because the first time we did this, we came up with like 60-something improvement suggestions, and the reaction from the sponsor was like, oh my God, so many improvements, so many problems that we want to fix. We can't do all of that. And it's true, we can't do all of those process fixes all at once. So we have to prioritize. And again, the participants were the ones to prioritize according to what's important for the customer, what's important for the business, what's important for them. So again, they were involved actively in defining what problems to fix first. And then we managed to implement. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And the implementation is where we learned a lot, because we had to make sure not only that the stakeholders are informed and consulted throughout the process, we had to be better at convincing them why we are making sometimes really significant and deep changes. And we could do this because now we had the data and the analysis and the language to talk to them to actually convince them. Not in all cases, but we did a far better job than we did in the past when convincing people by using data to give our arguments a foundation. And the conclusion is really the data should be there to empower your people, that you empower your workforce, your people, by facilitating them using data and you letting them work it out themselves. And then don't get just stuck at the implementation and change stage. Make sure to follow through. Make sure to anchor the change. And this is from Taichi Ono, who is sort of the founder of SixSigma. Progress cannot be generated when we are satisfied with the current situation. And the assumption in Lean and Kaizen and SixSigma is always, you can always improve. There is no perfect process. You can always improve on a process. Thank you.